Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Geeks with Wives Radio presents What's Your Issue podcast. Here with me tonight, I have my faithful co-hosts. First up, Danny B.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Danny? And Mr. Tyler Pollock is back, joining us once again.
Hello.
And I, of course, am your third co-host, technology editor at Geeks with Wives, Agathocles Stamus. So, in case you're unfamiliar with the format, this is our weekly radio show where we talk about the single issues of comics that have released in the past shipping week. So, tonight we will be going over books released during the shipping week of 8 July 2015, and we will be going heavy into the books, talking about them in all detail. So, if you haven't read them, if you still got issues remaining in your stack, feel free to finish those up and come back. Skip sections of the podcast as we get to each one, however you want to handle your anti-spoiler defense. And when I say books, I do mean comics, of course. So we're going to be shifting up the format just a bit here. We're still kind of tweaking the show as we go forward. Still kind of settling in on the final cast roster. And also still kind of playing with the format of what books we cover and how many. We've got a slightly different order that we're going to roll through tonight. Also, the main thing is we've decided that we're probably going to be staying away from news unless it maybe directly applies to a member of the creative team or one of the books that we're talking about. So we'll let the Capes podcast handle the news stuff. We may occasionally touch on it here and there. But mainly we're going to be talking about content and talking about the creative teams. So without further ado, first book on tonight's rundown is Strange Fruit. Sorry, I'm just trying to put the notes up and get them arranged on the screen where I can see them. So number one, and I kind of like all of us to indicate which book was the best thing they read this week, if it's on the discussion roster, and if it's not, just we can talk about the best thing you read this week at the end. But this was unabashedly the number one comic that I read this week, and I was really impressed. This is a J.G. Jones, Mark Waid story that the two collaborated on, and then J.G. Jones on art. And I'm not familiar with J.G. Jones's work. I kind of, myself, I personally hold kind of Alex Ross up as, the ultimate artist in comics. Whenever I see another artist's work, approaching, I guess, what in my head I think of as greatness. I always make that Alex Ross comparison. Do they have they gotten into that zone where he is not necessarily matching him one for one, but just kind of being in that area of talent. And man, sometimes the first page of the comic, you open it up and you're like, okay, so this is the. Yeah, Tyler, I don't know if that's yours with the background noise that you may want to.
Yeah, sorry, train.
Yeah, no problem. But sometimes when you see that first page of a comic, you're like, that's really a really awesome opening page, but you don't really know if that's going to be representative of what you see throughout the book. But man, when I turned to the second page of this thing and realized that was just the style and the caliber of the work, I was pretty amazed. So if you're not familiar with Strange Fruit, it is. So first of all, it's published by Boom Entertainment, and it's the story of the Great Flood of Mississippi in 1927, and mainly what Jones and Wade focus on is a lot of the racial tension surrounding the crisis. So there were African Americans who were day laborers who were responsible for shoring up the levees in Chatterley, Mississippi, where the story takes place, and the story opens with a group of townspeople from the town of Chatterley going to a segregated cafe, barging in and ordering the African American laborers back to work in the evening after they'd already completed a day's work. So there's a lot of arguments and a lot of tension. Actually, I was kind of surprised a lot of civil disobedience. And at one point, one person who's in there is identified as a fugitive that they've been after. He lights out from the place and goes on the lam. Several members of this crew set after him and change into their Klansman gear, and then chase them down to a nearby. I guess it's still a plantation. It's a plantation house where there's actually a senator and the widow who owns the plantation there defending the African American day laborer. And that's kind of the mundane stuff, right? It's kind of the historical, I shouldn't say mundane, but it's kind of the historical backdrop. What Wade and Jones inject into this is a Superman-like character who, in the midst of all of this crisis that's going on, racial tension, falls from the sky, crash lands in some type of spaceship in the river, and a very large, muscular, I would say African American, but I guess he's technically not African American since he's alien. So, very large black man emerges from the spacecraft, and that's who this fugitive runs into, literally in the woods. And then the Klansmen show up, and there's a big fight. So, the art was amazing. The colors are amazing. The rendering of the racial tension was just awesome. I wrote a review for this and put up on the site. It's awesome that this is being injected into our current social time as well. And then the book, after the fight and after the black alien kind of puts the Klansmen in their place, he's still naked. The fugitive from the cafe is like, "Hey, dude, you need to get dressed, right? You can't walk around naked," and hands him this bundle of cloth for him to wrap around his waist, and then J.G. Jones peels the camera back, and it's a Confederate flag that this guy has wrapped around his waist. So I thought that was pretty funny. Did either one of you guys read this or come across or hear anything about this particular?
I heard about it. I heard that people weren't really happy with his use of. I'm trying to remember what their complaints were. It was basically like, how it was just kind of exploitation in the worst sense. I think that's what people were mad about, or what people thought was the issue.
That's interesting because I didn't take that away at all. I mean, they do a really good job of rendering like the dialect of the time, and I mentioned in my review, that's a tough thing to get your hands around as a writer. It's kind of a very clunky device. And definitely interferes with the flow of your book. But I thought they pulled it off well. I mean, that's, if you've ever been on a podcast with Brad Bell, and this isn't to say anything negative about it, I mean, you definitely can tell that the Southern dialect is something different than a lot of us are accustomed to. And I think that was rendered well. As far as it potentially being, a blaxploitation, to take a film term, comic. I don't think it was that at all. I think the people and characters that they rendered were real, and like I said, I was kind of taken aback that in the conflict in the cafe, like, the fugitive African American. I mean, he talks back. I mean, he doesn't meet that situation with fear. He calls them out for being unfair and unjust, and trumping up charges on him. And that's what I called out in my review. What it reflects is, there was a certain point in that time where the minority populations were fearful, but that only went so far, and then it turned into frustration, right? And then that's just like with your parents, right? That's where you eventually hit that point where it's not just being ordered around what to do. It's now it's a discussion and an argument, right? So, So at any rate, Tyler, you also read another very character-driven story that was also from a publisher that's not one of the big two. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I read Archie #1. Um, it was great. Basically, Archie Comics is trying to move their world into a more modern time. And Mark Waid and Fiona Staples did it fantastic. You know, this issue starts out with Archie Andrews breaking the fourth wall and talking to the reader, um, and then we're thrust into this story that's already going on. People are upset because Archie and Betty have broken up for the first time, and they've been childhood sweethearts, through pretty much all their lives up until this moment. All we know is that there's something about the something called the lipstick incident, and no one really knows like what's going on or why they decided to break up. The only one that might know is Jughead, and um, needless to say, a few characters. I forget who all is in there, but you know Kevin Keller's in there, so I'm very happy about that. Um, uh, and they try to bribe Jughead with food, which is a great scene to tell them. And one of the best pages in this is Archie's talking to us about what's going on, and and you see him, and she obviously wants to talk to him, but then she pauses, and then she just like you see this look on her face, and then she walks away, and that is like one of the best pages I think I've read in a long time. Fiona Staples does great things with just the body language and the facial expressions and everything. It's great. I would really recommend it to anyone who's looking for just a fun, like, I mean, just a slice of life story, because that's what it's going to be. It's not Afterlife with Archie, it's not Sabrina. It's just a high school story, and it's Veronica isn't in the town yet, but the heat referencing that the lodges will be there soon, and the last page is Archie walking past a billboard with Mr. Lodge's face like glowering down at him, saying, and it's like Lodge Industries coming to your town too, and it's like they're Mark Waid, they are playing off the tropes of Archie and just the tropes of this kind of story in general, and I think that they managed to pull off something really really awesome here.
So now, was Staples' style similar to what she does in Saga, or did she kind of mix it up a bit?
I mean, no, I think it's pretty similar. She doesn't, try and alter it just for this. I do know that she didn't. I don't think that she colored it like she does in Saga. I know she didn't do all the art for it. But it's her art is great. Like I said, body language, facial expressions, her sense of movement is on point. It's really good.
Yeah, that's one thing I always find in Saga, that she has a way of getting characters to emote so well in art, even when they don't really have faces, like Prince Robot and his offspring.
Yeah, Robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the page I was mentioning, Betty has no dialogue in that, so you just see her body language and her face and her facial expressions, and you see all the emotion on her face right there, and it's great.
Cool. So speaking of Prince Robot and science fiction, my man Danny, you also read Lando #1, a comic which I also read. So why don't you give us the rundown on that, and we'll I want to kick around some of our potential differences or likenesses of opinion on that book.
Well, first of all, I'm going to start with just saying that I really enjoyed it. This is actually an issue I just basically waited till today to read, but I wish I would have read it when I picked it up last week. Basically, I mean, this is Lando's story. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been following Star Wars or Darth Vader. I mean, Marvel has been on point as far as the whole Star Wars saga goes. I think the only one I was about is Princess Leia's story. But this one's another one. Lando, I mean, first of all, the issue starts basically with him and I guess this woman who uh, basically, Lando's kind of known to be a sly guy. I mean, in the original movies, he was already like trying to put the moves on Leia like the second he saw her.
He's Mr. Colt 45.
Same situation here, except actually, it looks like he actually cares about the woman, at least at first. So I mean, he basically confesses he's trying to steal this object that's worth a lot of money because apparently he owes some serious money to someone, and he's trying to steal this object, and he ends up actually confessing it. And at the end of this, he actually ends up with the object after all. He ends up trading it in, hoping that it would buy off basically all his debt, but it only ended up covering 10% of it. So I thought that was kind of funny. So basically, as an alternative option, they're like, okay, you want to know how you can pay it? You have to pull one more heist. And basically it just kicks into this Ocean's 11 scenario.
That's exactly what I wrote about it. Yeah.
Where he just starts recruiting people, and then their goal is basically to steal this ship. And in this ship, they can just keep whatever they want, but as long as they just bring the ship back. They don't know much about it. They don't know who it belongs to. They just know that these guys want it. Go ahead.
So I got a bunch of questions to ask you, Danny. So first question is so I've also been reading Darth Vader. I did not read and do not have all the Star Wars books on my pull list, but of the ones that you're reading, how would you rank them in their runs so far?
Darth Vader's on top.
Okay.
Darth Vader's definitely on top. Star Wars, I mean, Lando, this is the only one, so I'm going to give it some time. But I don't know. I think I'm actually behind 2 issues with Princess Leia, just because it didn't drag me in as quickly as the other issues did. The second with Darth Vader was a whole nother world. The second you turn that page, you read in his voice. So I mean that was just, I don't know, that was just a whole different world. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's how I had a feeling that that's about how you and maybe a few other people would rank them. The other question I wanted to, I guess I just wanted to mention, my take on this. So first of all, this is a Charles Soule, Alex Maleev joint, and much like you, we had a discussion in episode 1 of this podcast where I said that I have a feeling or a sense that the order that you sometimes read books in definitely, I mean, it has to, impacts potentially, how you walk away from the book during a week. If you read a really awesome, kick butt issue is the first thing in your pull, it's going to be more difficult for other issues you read to surmount it. So I unfortunately, or regardless, either way, read this issue last in my stack. Sounds like what you did. And Charles Soule is one of my favorite writers in comics. And Alex Maleev is a very renowned artist. This issue kind of had a high bar for me that it needed to exceed. And one of the things this week is this was a gangbuster week in comics. I don't know how everyone else's stack was, but
I haven't even finished.
Okay. All right. So I mean, 1872 was strong. Ghost Racers #2 was strong. Negative Space #1. Saga #30. I mean, everything that I read this week was just really, really, really good. And Lando #1 just didn't hit the mark that I was expecting it to.
No.
And I don't know. I sometimes put the blame on Charles Soule, but And he's a busy guy. He tries to do a lot. I mean, hardest working man in comics, arguably. But I wonder if Lando is too hard a character to wrestle to terms, kind of like what you're seeing maybe in Leia. Like maybe she's really great in an ensemble, but maybe that character doesn't work as well standalone. My problem with Lando is everything about him is so disingenuous, right? He's I can't. There's another character like this who I just can't put my finger on right now. In the recent round of movies or TV shows that we've been watching on the screen sketch, but he's so disingenuous that like any scene that he's in where he seems sincere, you just have this creeping sense of doubt that it's just all another facade, right? So
Right.
that scene that you mentioned in the opening, the first few panels, I was like, oh, he's really
Right.
And then after like the third panel, I was like, he's running game, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one, and then finally the last not necessarily problem, but I just don't feel like the chemistry between him and Lobot is genuine. It just feels really forced and contrived. Go ahead.
No, I get what you're saying, and I'm kind of hoping for the opposite. I'm kind of hoping the one thing that's kind of, keeping him, for lack of a better word, just a good guy, is the relationship between him and Lobot. Because you're right. I do get the overall sense that this is about a guy who's just out for himself. But yeah, I'm hoping that it's that relationship that kind of keeps him on this path versus just this guy all about himself.
Cool. And then the last thing I'll mention, the Ocean's 11 kind of setup. Again, kind of the same thing. The first couple panels, when it was going, where I didn't really get that's what they were doing. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like he's recruiting these additional he just said he's not a fighter, so he's recruiting some muscle. But then when he went to the next person, I was like, oh man, this is Ocean's 11. Come on. So go ahead.
No. I was expecting them to dig a little bit deeper in that, and it's like literally like not even maybe a page later, it's like, oh, I'm done, guys.
Right. All right, Tyler. So tell us about another one of our favorite scoundrels in Constantine the Hellblazer #2.
Well, it's basically just a continuation of the last issue. Something's killing off Jean's ghost friends, which should be impossible, since they're ghosts and already dead. So it's basically him trying to figure out what's going on, and I didn't really read this as closely as I should have. We see one of the guys who appeared in the last issue, Oliver, the really big guy who Constantine flirted with in the last issue, who runs the restaurant. We see him for a few panels, and it's really awesome and cute. And basically it ends with John deciding that he needs to go home because he realizes that the reason he has all of his ghost friends is because everyone he cares about dies, and he doesn't. He is virgin feelings for Oliver, so he doesn't want Oliver to die. He wants him to. And the panel where he decides is he's in a cab and he's like right next to Oliver's restaurant, and then he looks in and Oliver's chatting with customers and they're all having a good time and stuff, and he doesn't want Oliver to not have that and just be surrounded by Constance by himself. So he decides to head back to the UK, and that's how it ends. And I'm really excited to see what comes next.
Hey, so let me ask you. So, on the topic of DC just attempting to continuously confuse the hell out of us, is this a post? Is this? I'm assuming just based on the issue number, this is one of the post-convergence half reboots that's going on.
It's part of the DC YOU. Okay. So yeah. From what I can tell, there's nothing that I know there was a Constantine series before this one. As far as I can tell, there's nothing that you know is followed is from that series that leads into this one at all. This just seems like a completely fresh new start. So
and that's cool. Brad Bell and I, comic book editor Brad Bell and I, did the Convergence special
yeah,
podcast. We talked about elements of the whole handling of the DC event and their reboot and how they're handling it. And there are elements of it. I think it's cool that some of these books are getting a fresh start. It's confusing as hell to me why half of the books are rebooting and restarting while the other half of the books continue on in the New 52 continuity.
Right.
This is thoroughly bamboozling strategy to me. But if Constantine gets a reboot out of it, that's good because I think that's a good comic that they keep they keep trying.
yeah,
and canceled. So.
And I don't, I know that Constantine was in the Vertigo stuff, and I think they tried to tie him in a lot with the the one that started immediately when the New 52 started. Right. I think from what I can tell, they tried to tie him into all the superhero stuff, and I don't think it worked very well.
Okay.
And there's it's James Tynion the Fourth and Ming Doyle and Riley Rossimo, and it's a completely different creative team.
Nice.
And Red Hood and Arsenal. That's a series that went through a major change because it was Red Hood and the Outlaws, but then they lost Starfire, and Starfire's in their own series now, so that kind of makes sense for a reboot or a relaunch or something.
Right.
So I think it depends on what they're trying to do with the marketing, I think.
Right.
Prez, that couldn't exist before Convergence when they were still doing the New 52 stuff, when they decided that everything still had to be connected. That wouldn't work at all.
Right.
Neither would Batmite or Bizarro or any of these miniseries that are coming out because of the DCU. So, I'm fine with it. I don't need everything to be connected. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with this.
All right, cool. So from the vestiges of all of the damage that DC has left in the wake of their event, Danny, let's flip over to the currently ongoing Marvel event, Secret Wars Battle World, and all of its tie-ins. So we got about 3 tie-ins to cover here in that vein. So Danny, why don't you kick us off with Civil War #1?
All right. So Civil War, it's written by. It's funny that you mentioned Soule. Charles Soule is the writer. Also, the art is by, and I'm going to butcher this guy's name, Lionel Yu, maybe? But he basically did a lot of the Ultimate Avengers and Ultimate X-Men series, and he did a few Axis as well. But this issue, loved it. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the original Civil War series. I feel like this one, And I'm again, this is just the first issue, but just reading this in, I feel like it's more of a what-if issue versus an actual continuation, because in the way Civil War ended was Captain America died, and he was taken out by Crossbones. But here we have actually, in this universe, you have the war actually is continuing. It's been going on for about 6 years. So the same thing happened with the bus. Nitro did his thing, leveled a few blocks.
All the inciting events are pretty much the same, right? Because I read it too, but I've never I know the basic points of Civil War, but I've never read it. So
right. Well, yeah. Everything as far as what set off the Registration Act, that all stayed the same. But now we have actually what the issue starts off with is Captain America. He's actually him, Black Panther, and I believe Cloak. They're actually infiltrating Prison 42, which Iron Man has built to keep a lot of the rebels in. So here they're trying to rescue these guys, these other heroes, and they end up actually setting up a self-destruct button, basically. So Cloak basically grabs everyone, regardless of whose side they're on, and takes them to a different location. Cloak attempts to close the portal, but the portal's still open, and the explosion basically just destroys the city. Not only that, but several mutants died in the process. The first one that comes to mind, actually, here we go. Cloak, Matt Gargan, Matt Murdock, Janet Van Dyne, and 15 million other people. That is how big this explosion was. So it just kept going downhill. So now you have basically what's essentially the U.S. It's split right down the middle. You got basically it's a West Coast versus an East Coast battle. It's basically a rap battle. We got the blue side, Captain America on the west. We got Iron Man on the east. His world is basically called the Iron.
Also, I feel it's important to say that Steve's the general now, and Tony's the president.
Right. Oh, right. I definitely left that out. So now you got these two different sides fighting. You got the only ones that we've really seen that we've really been introduced as far as whose side is on who. You know, we got Carol Danvers, who's got her own little iron suit. She's on Team Stark. So is She-Hulk, who they actually are dating, and then you got on Team Rogers, you got Spider-Man. Spider-Man, I think he's going to be the most interesting character in this. He actually the way he looks is actually a combination between his original suit, actually just the top half, with Falcon. He has the Falcon wings, he has the boots, he has the pants, and he's not wearing a mask. So I thought that was pretty cool. Basically, to go on with the story, Miriam Sharp, in the original, her son was one of the ones that was killed in the bus accident. She's actually, in this one, she's actually being, the mediator, really, and working out, basically getting Stark and Rogers in the same room to kind of work something out, to work some deal out. It's been 6 years. They've been going back and forth. During this fight, or during this discussion, both of them are really stubborn. I mean, they're literally stubborn old guys, just going back and forth. They're only seeing, they both got tunnel vision. They're quick to blame each other. And then Miriam Sharp, she stands up, and from far away, you just see she actually gets sniped from the back. And Stark immediately points out that it came from Roger's side. So Rogers is like, I know that, and then he calls Peter, and he calls Peter to check it out. Peter investigates it, sees where the rifle is positioned, and it's positioned miles away. Rogers says, well, there's only one person that has that kind of accuracy, and that's Bullseye. And Rogers says that Bullseye is basically, he's like, that's one of your guys. And Stark is like, no. That's not one of my guys. He does not work for me, basically. So then that kind of just continues to go downhill from there. I need to go backwards a little bit just because I wanted to address Parker's story, because during their talks, Stark is accompanied by She-Hulk, Rogers is accompanied by Spider-Man. Stark is like, hey, I got a surprise for you, Spider-Man, here. And apparently it's not apparently, it's Mary Jane and the daughter. So I'm not entirely sure what they're doing on Stark's side, but he hasn't seen his kid and his wife for 6 years. So he's like, here, hang out with your family while I go inside and handle business, kind of thing. So that's why I feel like Parker's story is definitely going to be the most interesting point. In the original series, in the original one, everyone targeted him the second he took off his mask. He was a very pivotal character. He was on Team Stark, and then he jumped to Rogers. So it'll be interesting to see where they go this route, or what if he ends up doing the opposite in this scenario.
Mhm.
So basically, to end that, uh, Miriam basically gets shot, and Stark is just, I mean, Rogers is basically at this point, you know what? There's no point. I'm gonna end this myself, and he just walks out, and he basically threatens Stark. I, I forget exactly what he says, word for word, but it's basically, "I'll be back for you to surrender" or something like that, and that's how it ends.
So it sounds like you were pretty up on this book.
Yes, this was my favorite one for sure.
Okay, so
Uh,
this was your best thing you read this week.
yeah. I mean, just because I think I'm such a big fan of the originals. I mean, the original series started with like man, about the trade, but I think it was
A
like
bang.
six issues, and then everyone had their spin-offs, and then I had to follow Spider-Man on his, and then the X-Men on theirs, and it was just that was one of my favorite story arcs. So I'm glad they're rehashing that.
Cool, cool. So it's very interesting. I mean, really quizzical that a guy who gets at least mentioned in that book, or I couldn't tell if you said he showed up, but is Bullseye because he
Right.
is the exact villain who shows up at the end of 1872 number one. So so 1872 number one is another kind of really interesting tie-in. And what I've been commenting about these tie-ins is in the same vein as what occurred during DC's Convergence event. Um, a lot of these creative teams are just getting the opportunity to write and render stories um, that the editorial staffs at either DC or Marvel probably would have never given them the latitude to do, during the regular continuity runs. So 1872 is done by the creative team of Greg Dugan and Nicole Varela with a cover by Alex Maleev. Um, so everybody's busy this week too. Right? We had Fiona Staples and Mark Waid uh, both doing two books that hit. Alex Maleev has been like all over the place in Marvel books, covers, single issues, with Lando. So incredibly busy summer for some of the most talented creators out there. But in 1872, um, it's another kind of Elseworld or what if kind of story where um, they have taken the Marvel characters, some of our favorites that we know, and put them back in the 19th century. And they've created an entire town on Battle World um, where uh, where they are all stuck in time and have assumed different roles. Now, I'm assuming that these are just other versions of these characters from a different timeline. So, at any rate, the name of the town is timely. Steve Rogers is the sheriff. Tony Stark is a drunken inventor in the town. Bruce Banner is this kind of meek physician who I think has come up with something called Doc Banner's extreme gamma elixir or something like that. He doesn't take it in the first issue, so I'm not sure if it causes him to Hulk out or not. But in an interesting twist, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, is the mayor of the town. And in the prelude to the comic, there's kind of a discussion that, at one point maybe he was altruistic and had the town's best intentions in mind, but when the Roxxon Corporation moved in, the head of that company got a hold of him and kind of started twisting him to his own ends. So Wilson Fisk has morphed in this timeline kind of into the same kind of character he is um, in the Marvel in the Marvel 616 universe. So at any rate, the backstory is that the Roxxon Corporation has moved in and has diverted water from a river to increase the productivity at a local silver mine, I think it is. And much like most of their storylines do in the current continuity, um, that winds up um, wreaking some ecological havoc in the area. Hold on just a second. So, so Red Wolf, a seldom seen character in the Marvel Universe, I think his last appearance was like 1992. Um, decides that he is going to blow up the dam that the Roxxon Corporation is using to divert this water because it's causing a drought in the area that supplies water to his tribe. Um, Sorry, real quick. Uh, so, so what's really awesome about this book, and I wrote a review on the site as well, is I think it was a really interesting artistic choice to render Steve Rogers, the town sheriff, as young Steve Rogers. Um, Going in, I kind of thought that they were going to set him up to be kind of an old, grizzled kind of veteran who'd been in law enforcement for a while, but he's this really youthful and still idealistic um, version of Cap. But it's not so much in that I know everything, I've seen everything, I know how people are, kind of approach that he's rendered as. A lot of times he's still relatively inexperienced, and I think has just come into the sheriff occupation of this town after a local U.S. Marshal was killed off by Wilson Fisk. Um, so the main thing of this issue is a gang of the Kingpin's guys get a hold of Red Wolf and are going to lynch him. And Rogers comes along and decides he's going to take Red Wolf in to follow the due process. The gang, obviously, in a kind of Back to the Future 2 or Back to the Future 3 and Tombstone kind of deal, come to get their chosen target out of jail and remove Steve Rogers from the equation, and it does not go the way that they want it to. And the end result being when Kingpin decides that he needs to bring in extra muscle, there's a big, huge, really gorgeously rendered final splash page of Bullseye kind of walking towards the screen, because he's the guy that Bullseye in 19th century garb, with a little skinny tie and a black blazer on. There are three other characters, villains in that render, and I'm not exactly positive who they're supposed to be. I think one is Lady Deathstrike, but I'm not certain. Another might be Sabretooth, and I'm not sure who the fourth one is. I'm sure it's out there somewhere if I Google it. But really awesome book. Was a strong contender to be my number one for this week. And the final tie-in that I wanted to kind of run over is Tyler. I wanted to get your thoughts on Ghost Racers #2, because this was also an issue that was in my stack for the week.
I loved it. It was great. It was basically a backstory issue, right? So, we got the story of how Robbie came to find himself in the Colosseum, and I really liked the difference between the 616 version and this version. Basically, he's friends with the group that bullied him in the 616 universe, and they're teenage boys, and teenage boys will do what they do when it's a very hot day, so they break a fire hydrant. I really like how the fire hydrant has the graffiti on it, "Hail Hydrant." So I thought that was really funny. Yeah. So, and then basically giant police robots show up and say anything in Doomstad is punishable by the law. And then Gabe was the one who broke the fire hydrant, and then Robbie obviously takes the ball for it because he's Robbie Reyes and that's what he does for his brother. And then to flash forward a bit, and you get Robbie meeting the rest of the Ghost Rider gang, and it's in the first race, and what comes immediately after the race. So torture, that's always fun. And then flash forward to now, and you still have Arcade being a jerk, and it's really good. The art is really, really awesome. It's different than anything else that any other art that's been on a Robbie Reyes book. It's flat, but it's kinetic. You get a very good sense of movement throughout all the panels, and
Yeah, that was one thing that I wrote. It's really doing cars in comics.
yeah,
is
especially
really
cars.
hard because it's just after you get so accustomed to kind of all the high adrenaline, high speed car chases that you see rendered on movie screens, it's really hard to convey that in a flat two-dimensional artistic format. But I think Juan Gideon, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name. Gideon.
Let me see. Where are you? Juan Gideon or Gideon.
I think he's doing a really good job. I think he's doing the best job that you can do, being handed.
Yeah, I really just love the eyes
right.
on it. It's you get so much emotion because just like the little. He does really good work with the little eyelid movements.
Right.
Displaying fear, excitement.
There's a bit
Mainly
of a
fear.
there's a bit of a trade-off between he and Trad Moore, who's the original artist. And so Felipe Smith is the writer on this, and he was the same guy who was the writer on the 2014 reboot requel of All New Ghost Rider, which was the first appearance of Robbie Reyes.
Yeah.
And Trad Moore was on that book initially, and I forget who the second artist was that they brought in after the first arc, but this style was. I mean, he and Trad Moore were very much the same stylistically. But I actually feel like those guys both did speed and kinetics better than Juan Gideon does. But
I've noticed that Juan, he does the oh my gosh, what is it? The black backlights for the cars.
okay.
And they're going so fast that they leave trails of light for that, and that's how he shows how fast they're going, and I like that.
Okay, cool.
It's something different. It's not just speed lines all the time.
Well, Trad, and maybe it's a little kind of Michael Bay's, but Trad used a lot of fire and flame to communicate the speed, and I thought that was good. But I will say I think what Gideon does better is I like his creatures better. They are not as over the top. Trad Moore's creatures were like almost these kind of like Asian art renditions, with really big, wide, fangy, smiles and.
Yeah. You also have to just look at the context. I mean, he was right. He was drawing a Ghost Rider comic,
right?
And they did Demons from Hell or whatever. So, I mean, words. But yeah, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm just saying that there are some kind of nuanced trade-offs between the two different styles that have been taken last year and are being taken this year with these Ghost Rider titles that I appreciate both, but they are different, and I think each one brings something. I really love the three-headed creature that Gideon Redder.
Oh yeah, the one that's made out of his former friends.
Right. And let me thank you, Tyler, for breaking it down so expertly when you started talking about this book, because one thing that was bugging me about this is I didn't realize this was not the 616 version of Robbie Reyes, because there's only been one run of a comic with him in it. I just assumed there was only one version. So there were things that bothered me, like the fact that Gabe was different. He didn't have the disabilities that he had.
Oh, I think he still has the disabilities. I just don't think they're, in this universe at least, as noticeable.
Well, he's not in a. I mean, the 616 Gabe was wheelchair bound.
Yeah, he was for a bit, and then I think he started to get better. I'm not entirely sure how that works. I'm not an expert on that.
I will accept your explanation that it's not the 616 version.
Because the 616 they hated the 616 Robbie and the 616 gang of teenagers. They hated each other.
Right. Also, starkly different relationship between Robbie and Eli.
Yeah, I liked that. I'm interested because this, I don't, from what I can tell, I don't think that Eli in this universe is the, you know,
vengeful spirit.
I mean, he seems really different than the 616 in just in what he's saying, how he's actually being motivational for to Robbie, and that's different than the 616, and I'm interested to see if they go into that more.
I love the escape. I love the escape at the end of the race in this issue, where at the beginning of the book, you see Eli tell Robbie that Robbie's job is to keep winning races, and in the meantime, Eli will kind of work in the background. And in case you don't get what we're talking about, Eli is kind of the spiritual. In the 616 version, he was the demonic or ghost spirit that possessed Robbie Reyes. But it's a different kind of possession in that comic where he was kind of flying co-pilot. It wasn't a complete takeover. But in this universe, like I said, there was a conversation where Eli said, Robbie, you keep winning these races, and in the meantime, I'll be working on a way to get us out of this. And just when you think, Robbie is going to lose his first, well, it would be his second race and be tortured for the entirety of an evening before the next race, Eli pulls out a way to portal him out of there, and he's just gone. And Arcade is incredibly frustrated, which it's always nice to see Arcade getting his comeuppance.
I've noticed that for some of these second issues, they're actually starting to leave their domains, which is against Doom's law.
Right.
Like A-Force, that version of She-Hulk leaves and goes to apparently the Sentinel territories.
Okay.
The Days of Future Past world. There's Old Man Logan. Obviously, he went to the Age of Apocalypse country, and we don't know where Robbie went, but he obviously isn't. He's not at least in the Colosseum anymore. Right. He might be in an entirely different domain, even. So we don't. But I've noticed that they're starting Runaways. Runaways. They're leaving their school, which is not good at all.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, that was a pretty healthy conversation about Secret Wars Battle World tie-ins. So.
Actually,
go ahead.
Do you mind if I talk about Runaways real quick?
Yeah. I can give you 1 minute of airtime, then I got to give Danny 1 minute of airtime on Batman 42.
Okay. So it's the second issue. They're gearing up for the final exam. The final exam's happening. It's basically they're finding a bunch of holograms, and the holograms are hard light and can kill. Pixie dies, and I'm sad that a bisexual character only revealed in the first issue, dies in the second issue. That's really not. I wish it didn't happen, but serves a purpose, and they learn that all these holograms are actually just the other kids in school. So and they decide that they can't stay there anymore. Although otherwise they will die, and it's based on an escape story. They board a it's not a helicarrier, it's just some kind of ship, and they head out, only to realize that one of their group is missing and not on the ship with them. And from this next page, it looks like they're going to go to the 1872 country, which should be interesting. So I'm really excited to see how that goes. I just wish that Pixie hadn't died. I mean, I get why they did it, but it just feels it feels sucky.
Cool. So I apologize to put you in the hot seat, Danny B, on your debut episode, but I got to give you the speed bullet round and cover Batman 42 for us very quickly before we have to hop over to the screens meeting.
All right. Well, Batman 42 is basically Gordon still adjusting to the new role as Batman. Basically, he this is a man who's full of self-doubt. He's trying to to become the Batman, but he doesn't really know who the Batman is or what he really stands for. So he's still kind of struggling with that. The beginning of the issue starts off with these two kids playing with these Batman figures, which hopefully you can see here. And they're basically, it's funny because they're basically discussing who's the better Batman. And the one with the original one is like, hey, mine has a Batmobile or whatever. Then the next panel just goes straight to Gordon discussing when is he getting one. But fast forward a little bit, we finally start to get some name dropping or some hints of this upcoming supervillain, Mr. Bloom, who was announced back in May. Who's I guess supposed to be Gordon's version of the Joker. I'm not entirely sure yet, but basically what's going on is there's criminals throughout the city who are appearing to have the seed implanted in them, and this seed is either killing them immediately or giving them temporary powers and then eventually killing them. So Gordon has a run-in with them, and not with Mr. Bloom. We don't see him the villain physically. But he has a run-in with one of the criminals, and that's kind of basically what's going on in the issue. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was at the very end of the issue, we see Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne, it actually goes back to the beginning scene with those two kids playing with the toys, and then all of a sudden you see Bruce Wayne walking right beside them carrying a case of water. And it looks like he's working at a school because one of the teachers asked, "Hey, what are you doing here so early?" And he's like, "The AC was broken." This is a full, like, bearded Wayne who, no mention of Batman or anything like that. I don't know if he's lost his memory or what, but it's just him casually working at a school. And then all of a sudden, Gordon shows up, which I understand due to time constraints, I kind of skipped a little bit. But Gordon shows up and he's like, "Hey, Bruce Wayne, we need to talk." And then Bruce Wayne just kind of like, "Who the hell are you?" And Gordon's like, "I'm Batman." And then that's kind of that is literally how the issue ends.
That's
so
a
I'm kind of curious how what they're doing, because the last issue happened the same way. Some random stranger found Bruce Wayne sitting at a park bench. They looked at him and they were like, "Bruce Wayne?" Like, that's literally how it ended. So I'm curious what they're doing with him. We thought, or it was kind of hinted that Wayne was kind of gonna, he was no more. He was gonna die,
right,
along with the Joker. So I'm kind of curious what's going on with that.
So we got time for a couple questions. So, are any fears that they are going to take the story in the direction of kind of the Superman arc where he was just kind of walking the earth, soul searching, or I guess maybe kind of the post-Doomsday Superman arc that we've seen in the New 52, where Clark becomes bearded Clark, and kind of the same thing is kind of soul searching and trying to figure out and understand, why he fell under the influence of the Doomsday virus and so forth.
Right. Actually, that hasn't crossed my mind so much. Actually, the biggest fear before 41 was, why is Gordon Batman? Nightwing could have been a better option. Robin, hell, even Damian. Like, you wouldn't think Gordon. You wouldn't think this. I think he's 60-ish, putting on the Batman suit. So that was my biggest fear. I feel like, as far as Wayne goes, I kind of feel like maybe it's gotten to a point, because I don't know if you kept up with that final fight with him and the Joker. I feel like maybe it comes to the point where it's like, I'm done, which that doesn't seem very Batman-like at all, because Bruce Wayne is Batman. That's it. He that's all he knows. But I feel like that might be the way they're going. That's actually the first thought that came to my mind. Maybe they're going this path where, like, Bruce feels like, oh, they got it now. I'm good.
So it's kind of an exploration of the ending that was hinted at in The Dark Knight Returns.
Right. That's the first thing that actually came to my mind. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards, or maybe he just lost his memory. I don't know.
Okay. So I guess the last question I'll ask before we take us out is, this run of Batman in the New 52 has definitely been very arc definitive. We've kind of trudged, very resolutely from one arc to the other. So we've had, Death of the Family. We've had Batman Year Zero. I'm not a regular on Batman in my poll, so a few other ones which I've heard. How do you feel this is shaping up in comparison to some of these new
I
52 arcs?
I would not put this one up there just yet. I mean, uh, this is only the second issue, but I definitely wouldn't put this up there yet. These past two issues have focused mainly on Gordon's struggle more than anything else. This is a regular guy who had to quit smoking, had to tell his daughter who he was, had to get in shape. Like this is a guy who was basically like, look, we need you to be Batman now. And that's been the biggest plot so far that we've seen so far. But I think with Scott Snyder and Capullo, I think it's in good hands though.
Right.
I mean, I follow I follow Snyder's run for a while now, and I'm not too concerned.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's go ahead and get out of here. Tyler Pollock, if people wanted to keep up with you in social media and see what you're writing about, where would they connect with you?
I'm on Twitter as Cyberpunk Warlock. That's Warlock with a LOK because Twitter wouldn't let me have the full spelling of Warlock. And you can always find my writings on Geeks with Wives. And yep.
All right, very cool. Danny B, how about you? Where can people catch up with you in social media?
Twitter, Instagram, basically everything else. It's just Danny Benavides. That's Benavides.
All right, cool. And if you want to catch up with me, you can check me out on the site, geekswithwives.com, or check out my Google Plus page under A Glass Please Stamus. So sorry for the rush tonight. We have another Geeks with Wives staff meeting that's been scheduled on one of the other podcasts. So a couple of us have to get out of here, but it's been fun, and stay tuned and on the geekswithwives.com and Geeks with Wives radio channels, and keep an eye out for What's Your Issue number 3. We will be reconvening next week and every week thereafter. Thanks so much for joining in. We are out of here.